She never planned to become a household name. Carole Scaldeferri was just 15 when she first slipped into Studio B, her dark hair framed by a headband that would soon define her look. She had come only to glimpse her teenage idol, actor Sal Mineo. Instead, it was Carole who caught the eye of producers and soon after, millions of viewers across the nation. Within months, she was receiving 500 to 600 fan letters each week, a flood of affection that turned an ordinary Philadelphia schoolgirl into a figure of national fascination. Dick Clark's team even assigned her a private dressing room once used by Sally Starr, a mark of how quickly she had become central to the Bandstand story. On camera, she wasn't loud or theatrical. What made her magnetic was a natural grace, a skip in her step, the soft confidence in her smile, the ease of her movement in ballerina flats. Yet, fame proved fleeting. How could a girl so adored choose to leave it all behind? That is the journey we'll now follow. Carole Ann Scaldeferri grew up in southwest Philadelphia, a neighborhood where every corner seemed to echo with music and the chatter of families gathered on front stoops. Born into an Italian-American household, she was surrounded by the values of faith, family, and tradition. Her childhood unfolded in the late 1940s and early 1950s, when America was adjusting to post-war prosperity and teenagers were carving out a culture of their own. Rock and roll was beginning to surge through radios and jukeboxes, reshaping the rhythm of everyday life. At West Catholic Girls High School, Carole blended the innocence of youth with a spark of individuality. She was remembered for her dark features, her knack for style, and her quiet confidence. Friends recalled how she picked up dance steps by watching some of the African-American girls at school, adopting their flair and rhythm before making it her own. It was a small but telling glimpse into the adaptability that would later make her stand out on television. Her childhood was not one of privilege, but it was rich with simple joys. Family dinners filled the house with the aroma of Italian cooking. The household radio played the latest hits by Frankie Lyman or Buddy Holly, while Carole's shoes grew scuffed from endless hours of practice in the living room. She loved songs like Little Darlin' and Tears on My Pillow, repeating the steps until the music felt inseparable from her own heartbeat. Dancing was never a calculated pursuit of fame. It was an instinct, a joy she carried with her. Her parents, like many of their generation, worried about how television and fame might affect a daughter they hoped would pursue a steady career. Carole even considered child counseling and later took college courses in that direction. Yet her family couldn't deny the way her eyes lit up when she danced. They came to see it not as a fleeting phase, but as part of her essence. That seemingly ordinary childhood, shaped by neighborhood friendships, school uniforms, and the soundtrack of early rock and roll, was soon to collide with something extraordinary. But could an ordinary Philadelphia girl truly be ready for the sudden glare of nationwide fame? Carole Scaldeferri's entry into American Bandstand was almost accidental. At just 15, she heard that actor Sal Mineo, the Hollywood star she admired, might make an appearance at the show. With the casual excitement of a teenager, she decided to go, expecting nothing more than to stand in line and maybe catch a glimpse of him. Instead, she stepped into a studio that would change the direction of her youth. Outside Studio B in Philadelphia, the atmosphere was electric. Teenagers lined the sidewalk, their laughter mixing with the muffled sound of rock and roll leaking from inside. Carole waited among them, her headband neatly in place, her ballerina flats tapping against the pavement. The anticipation was palpable. Everyone wondered what songs would play, who would get on camera, and what it might feel like to be seen across the nation. When Carole finally entered the studio, the scene dazzled her. The bright lights reflected off the polished dance floor, the cameras loomed overhead, and the music surged through the room with a pulse that seemed to match her own heartbeat. What could have been intimidating instead felt strangely natural. She was just one girl in the crowd, but producers noticed her composure and quiet poise almost immediately. Her first appearance on camera felt surreal. As the music kicked in, she moved instinctively, her footwork light, her smile easy but genuine. There was nothing rehearsed, yet the camera found her. At home, viewers saw not just another teenager, but a girl who seemed to dance with effortless elegance. That single moment began a journey that would transform her from an unknown schoolgirl into one of the most admired faces on Bandstand. Soon, she was invited back again and again. The small chance trip to see a movie star had instead made Carole into a star in her own right. What began as a whim was now a commitment, television time, rehearsals, and a growing sense that she had stepped into a world far bigger than she could have imagined. That first dance in Studio B was only the beginning. The whirlwind of attention waiting for her was something no teenager could have prepared for. Carole Scaldeferri's rise on American Bandstand was swift and undeniable. Within months of her first appearance, she had become one of the most recognizable dancers on the floor. By the late 1950s, her presence was so familiar that viewers across the country felt they knew her personally. Every afternoon, as the cameras panned across the crowded studio, audiences waited for the girl with the headband and ballerina shoes, the one whose movements carried both grace and warmth. Her dancing was never about showmanship or flash. What made Carole magnetic was her quiet elegance. She danced with a light skip in her step, a fluid rhythm that seemed instinctive rather than staged. The camera seemed to find her naturally, often lingering on her face or footwork, as though drawn by her unstudied charm. In an era when many dancers tried to stand out with dramatic gestures, Carole captivated by simply being herself. The public's response was overwhelming. At the height of her popularity, she received between 500 and 600 letters a week from fans. Some sent headbands, others ballerina flats, hoping to share in her style. Producers, recognizing her appeal, gave her the private dressing room once used by local star Sally Starr, and she was chauffeured by limousine to appearances in New York. These were extraordinary experiences for a teenager still attending West Catholic Girls High School, where she balanced homework with a life that suddenly felt larger than anything she had imagined. Her image spread beyond the television screen. Teen magazines began to feature her, and in one memorable issue of Teen magazine, she appeared on the cover with fellow dancer Pat Molitieri. For teenage girls across America, Carole was more than a dancer. She was a style icon, a role model, a girl who seemed both approachable and glamorous. Her favorite songs, 16 Candles, Splish Splash, Tears on My Pillow, became part of her identity, and viewers associated her face with the rhythms of those hits. Yet, her fame never made her distant. Carole remained the girl next door, smiling warmly at fans, carrying herself with a composure that belied her age. Her image, both elegant and relatable, made her unforgettable. And when she paired with certain partners on the floor, she became part of moments that would live on as bandstand legend. Those partnerships, and the memories they created, would define much of her legacy on the show. Unlike some bandstand regulars who became inseparable duos, Carole Scaldeferri was known for her versatility. She rarely had a steady partner, and that very fluidity made her special. She danced with the dark-haired Mike Balara, the charming Nick Gaeta, the smooth Don Cione, and Harvey Robbins, the only one in her circle who wasn't Italian, but whose good humor and warmth made him a favorite both in the studio and among fans. Each partnership brought out a different side of her, and her ability to adapt kept her presence fresh and magnetic. Behind the cameras, Carole's popularity carried its own stories. She once changed into a different dress in the middle of a broadcast, and the studio received hundreds of letters asking about it. Fan clubs mailed her gifts, headbands, shoes, notes filled with devotion. The producers noticed her appeal and gave her privileges most teenagers could only dream of, from the Sally Starr dressing room to limousine rides for special appearances. Carole, though flattered, remained grounded, treating the attention with a mix of gratitude and quiet amusement. She also dabbled in modeling, posing for De Haven Finishing School, where her photogenic charm was showcased in print. Cameramen instinctively zoomed in on her when they needed clean, elegant footwork, knowing Carole's timing and style would never falter. Even under the strict bandstand rules, like don't dance too close or keep your posture proper, she managed to stay natural, often laughing when things didn't go perfectly. Friends recalled her humor when a partner missed a step or when studio rules interrupted a moment of spontaneity. The competition for airtime was fierce. Dancers jockeyed for positions where the cameras would linger longest, and being featured often meant more fan letters and recognition. Yet Carole never seemed consumed by rivalry. She held her place with quiet confidence, respected by her peers for her grace on and off the floor. She was admired not only for her popularity, but for the way she carried it, with humility and poise. In the eyes of millions, Carole Scaldeferri embodied the glamour of bandstand's golden age. But every perfect dance, every camera close-up, carried an unseen weight. Beneath the applause, the expectations of fame pressed heavily. For Carole, the time was coming when those pressures would force her to choose a different rhythm. By the early 1960s, the brightness of American Bandstand began to cast longer shadows for Carole Scaldeferri. She was still a teenager, expected to keep up with schoolwork, respect her family's hopes for stability, and somehow manage the demands of sudden fame. The letters that once thrilled her began to feel overwhelming. Recognition on the streets, once flattering, sometimes left her longing for anonymity. The studio, with its fierce competition for airtime, now required more energy than she could always summon. Her image, carefully built around headbands and ballerina shoes, began to feel like a costume. These tokens of style had once been symbols of joy, but as the years went on, they became reminders of the expectations that followed her everywhere. For a girl who had started dancing for the sheer love of music, the weight of performing for millions was becoming difficult to bear. At the same time, her world outside the studio was shifting. Teen culture was changing rapidly, new faces appeared on Bandstand, and the spotlight never lingered forever. Friendships evolved, rivalries simmered, and the pressures of maintaining popularity became more intense. Carole, who had always carried herself with calm composure, began to feel the strain of being endlessly compared to others. When she chose to step away, there was no dramatic announcement, no scandal. She simply walked a different path. After graduation, she pursued college courses in child counseling, hoping to turn her compassion into a career. Though that ambition later shifted to real estate, it reflected her desire for a more grounded life. She wanted stability, meaning, and freedom from the constant need to perform. For fans, her departure was a quiet shock. Letters continued to arrive asking why she no longer appeared on screen. Some clung to memories of her dances, while others accepted her absence with quiet respect. For Carole herself, leaving Bandstand was bittersweet. She carried nostalgia for the joy it had given her, but also relief in reclaiming her own pace. Her choice marked a turning point, a reminder that fame is not always the end goal. Sometimes the bravest step is walking away from the spotlight to discover who you are without it. When Carole Scaldeferri left the cameras behind, she stepped into a life defined less by fan mail and more by everyday joys. For a time, she explored college courses in child counseling, an early sign of her desire to help others. Eventually, she found her calling in real estate, joining Century 21 in Springfield, Delaware County. There, her natural warmth and ability to connect with people translated seamlessly into guiding families toward new homes. Clients remembered her poise and sincerity, the same qualities that once made her shine on television. Her personal life held its own remarkable story. In 1977, she married Richard Spada, a man who had first seen her photograph when she was only 14. Years later, through a stroke of fate, he arranged to meet her at the Philadelphia airport with the help of Dick Clark's office. That meeting blossomed into a love story that endured. Together they built a home in Philadelphia, later moving to Lansdowne, and finally Newtown Square, weaving a life of devotion and partnership. For a time, the couple even ran a beauty salon, a small business that reflected Carole's sense of style and community spirit. Beyond work, Carole treasured the intimacy of family life. Friends remembered evenings filled with laughter at the dinner table, quiet weekends in suburban Pennsylvania, and summer trips that offered her the peace she had once missed amid the bright lights of Studio B. The same girl who had been driven to New York in a limousine now found her greatest joy in simple rituals. Holidays with loved ones, walks in the neighborhood, and the ordinary comfort of a life she had chosen for herself. She never fully severed ties with her past. Bandstand reunions brought her back together with old friends and fellow dancers, reviving the music of the 1950s and 1960s as if no time had passed. For those who saw her again, it was like watching a cherished memory come to life. The same grace, the same warmth, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had lived fully beyond her youth. In 2013, Carole passed away at the age of 70 after a mild stroke and a struggle with congestive heart failure. Yet even in her final years, she carried with her the dignity and composure that had defined her from the start. For those who remembered, she had not disappeared. She had simply chosen a quieter, more meaningful rhythm. Carole Scaldeferri's story is not only about a dancer who once received hundreds of letters a week, but about a young woman who embodied an era of innocence and rhythm. Her headbands, her ballerina shoes, and her graceful skip steps became symbols of a generation discovering its identity through music and movement. She may have chosen a quieter life beyond the spotlight, but the memories she left on American Bandstand remain vivid, etched into the collective heart of those who watched her grow up on screen. For the millions who tuned in, Carole was more than a teenager dancing on television. She was a reminder that elegance could be simple and that true presence didn't need to shout. Do you remember seeing Carole Scaldeferri glide across the bandstand floor? Which song, which dance, or which image of her has stayed with you through the years? Share your memories. We'd love to hear the moments that still dance in your heart. If these memories touched you, join us here on American Bandstand Memories. Subscribe so you won't miss the next story of the dancers, the music, and the era that shaped a generation.